That was such a great episode. Why didn't more people listen? Sometimes I feel like, is this thing even on? Hi, my name is Neil Matthews. I too have been exactly what I just described. Wondering and wanting a second set of ears to hear my show. Well, that's when I came up with Podcast Insight Solutions, providing you insight and solutions into your show. Whether that be improving your interview style, improving your questions, getting the guests to really come alive, or maybe it's the audio. That's always a little shaky, or maybe it's the editing. I could get better at that. Well, that's where Podcast Insight Solutions comes in. I'd like to listen to your show, provide a second set of ears, and help you come up with solutions to those problem areas in your show. Right now, we're offering a free 30-minute consultation to take your show from meh to shining like a diamond. At Podcast Insight Solutions, we're transforming podcasts with expert insight. Book your consultation today.
Welcome home to Other People's Shoes, where every step tells a story. Get ready for an emotional journey like no other with Homecoming. Our homes are more than just a place. It's where we find safety, comfort, and connection through intimate conversations, heartfelt anecdotes, and inspiring stories. We believe that everyone deserves to feel welcomed and secure in their own home. Let us remind you of the beauty and warmth that home should bring. Other People's Shoes, where every step leads you to Homecoming.
Welcome home. Welcome home to Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really excited you've stopped by the property. Now, some of you might be thinking, the property? Well, let me help. So back, I don't know, last October-ish, my wife and I decided to put our house that we had lived in ever since my daughter was born up for rent, and we would begin the process of building a home. Now, let me be candid here. She came to me, she being my wife, and said, how much involvement do you want to have in building the house? I looked at her very nicely, smiled so nicely, and said, 0. She said, what? I said, let me help. I don't care. She said, what about the countertops? Don't care. What about the paint? Don't care. What about the da-da-da-da-da? Nope, don't care. Not that I don't care. I am not Joanna Gaines. I am not Chip Gaines or Extreme Homemaker. That's not me. These hands, as I stare at them before you, were not made for manual labor, nor am I Bob Vila from old. I'm like Tim the Toolman Taylor. Like, you get me around tools, it's going to be a nightmare. I don't know what all that has to do with it, but if I filled out a survey like of the things I'm good at, I would probably have to put a lot of other categories when it comes to my Home Depot or my Better Homes and Gardens experience. I don't subscribe to Good Housekeeper for a reason. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. You know, here's the thing. There are some people that just maybe fit in the other category. That's me. And that might also be my guest today. Welcome in my new friend, Janai. Janai, how are you today?
I'm really good. How are you?
So it's a funny story with names.
Mm-hmm.
We had a guest on, and I hope she hears this, and I might even send it to her just because it's fun. So we had on a guest in our last season called Dear. She wrote this amazing book about her mom. Her mom passed away. And so she is helping people through grief. Let me tell you, I think we need those folks in our lives, especially if we struggle with grief. She wrote this book. Her name, when you look at it, looks like Chelsea. It looks exactly like Chelsea. Siri, all the name pronunciation places, pronounce it as Chelsea. Spoiler alert, it's not Chelsea. It's not. What do you do with that as a host?
Oh, I don't know. How do you wait?
You say it wrong is what happens as a host.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Janai, welcome in. Do not say Janae. Do not say it. Don't say it that way. Janai.
No, and I think the attempt, like, okay, I'm going to internalize this and remember like that. It's not necessarily getting it right the first time. That is the ultimate act of hospitality. It's really like the trying to, and you're like, oh, I got to pivot. And learning to pivot and learning to adapt, that makes a hospitable space. And I think you're that. So
think about a subject I love to talk about, and that's this, is if we were to find your shoes by the front door, what shoes might we find? Because now in the new house, we can't wear our shoes in the house, even though I violate that on the daily. And I have a citation in my cubby at home. There's a lot of citations for wearing my shoes in the house. Just kidding. But what pairs of shoes might we find for you?
It's either they're Adidas Superstar, or they're like Adidas Superstars. Maybe they're like an offshoot. They're Adidas with the 3 stripes, the black stripes, very classic. Or, and this might be really like hippie and crunchy of me, my Birkenstocks. I don't make that face. Birkenstocks are awesome.
They're not.
They're awesome. I love them.
So there are certain shoes I can't get around. I still am not a Puma guy. I don't know why, because I really like cats. And I was a Panther in high school. Go Panthers. I still hold on to that high school mascot after it's been, 1999 till now. So you guys can do the math. But I still hold on to that Panther roots. So I can't get around the Puma because it's a different cat. I know. It's the way my brain works. And the other one is New Balance. I had a pair of Spike New Balance when I ran track, and racing flats when I got out of high school. And they ripped like all the way down the seam. And I was like, okay, those are trash. Never wearing those again. And then Skechers, Birkenstocks. Those are like my shoe hate list, I guess.
Man, I feel like Birkenstocks are awesome. I know I do like the sacrilegious where I wear them with socks too. Black socks. I mean, if I'm weird, then I'm weird, and I am okay with being weird. That's who you are talking to right now.
Janai is weird.
Yeah, I'm weird. I'm okay with weird.
And Janai's in the other box too, right?
Yeah.
But when we talk about homecoming and we talk about Lowe's and all those Home Depot type places, I was actually being honest. Some guys go into those places. They know right where to go. They know all the places. They know all the spots. They know all the things. I go in there and I literally look just bewildered. I'm the guy that's standing in the entryway going, I don't know where to go. And they're like, well, what are you building? And I'm like, I don't even know how to build stuff. I don't even know why I'm here. I was not the kid that played Legos or Lincoln Logs or those other stick things with the round thing. I wasn't that guy. Erector set, that wasn't me. And so growing up, I truly felt like I was never at home in those type of environments. I had friends that would come over and they were like, let's play Legos. And I was like, I don't have those. For me, it always made me feel insecure and not really at home. Do you have any moments like that where you really felt like you weren't at home? And maybe that's why this homecoming series resonates not only with you, but with me?
Yeah, I think I definitely get by the way, we have Legos. Like, you open my office door and there's Legos. We have like a space shuttle Lego. We have Legos on my dining room table right now. One with the like Van Gogh starring. We're a Lego family, but that's the nature of some boys. And we are at Home Depot every weekend. I said kind of in my internal monologue, walking into a space, I am not at home here. I do not belong here. This space, this table was not constructed with me in mind. And that's okay. Like, I can sit here for a while. I'm traveling through. I don't have to be at home here. And really, I kind of talk about this in some of my writing work and stuff, I feel at home in myself. When you're feeling at home in yourself, you can go out into those places where you don't really belong and know that you're just passing through. Not only will I get to a place where I feel like it's home, but home I carry with me.
The hardship and the challenge, especially in this series, is some people didn't grow up in a great home environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm starting to discover in these episodes is, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that sometimes helps when you feel like, okay, you're not alone, that home didn't have to be the Tanners from Full House. It didn't have to be the Seavers from The Growing Pains. It didn't have to be the Cosbys. It could have been, it definitely wasn't the Brady Bunch or the Partridge Family. I'm running out of families right now. The Winslows or Step by Step. It didn't have to be any of those things. Came across this quote years ago, and I don't even know where it even started from. It says, know your worth. That's what it says, like in big, bold letters. And then it says, you must find the courage to leave the table if respect is no longer served.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that just haunts me but it does. What does it do for you?
I resonate. I'm like, hell yes, you leave, because I've had to leave. I had one of those childhoods, found faith. Not as a kid. I wasn't raised in any sort of religious home. I found faith later in life because I was essentially looking for some semblance of hope because my childhood was very hopeless. I think I grew up in an environment that I was just talking to my cousin about this. I grew up in an environment I had to survive. It was home. Home was the address I listed, but it wasn't home. It was a shadow of what could have been, but it never was. It was never the Seavers. It was never the Tanners. It was never, Uncle Jesse was never there. There are some tables you need to leave. You grieve them because you wish they were better. You wished for something that never was with the people that were around those tables, but you have to leave them. And I think I'm in a place where I can grieve it and know that there's joy on the other side of leaving too. Discernment of knowing when to leave is pretty critical. I think I can celebrate my ability to leave because I've discerned when I can leave, when I should leave, and when I should stay.
When I was growing up, I remember we spent time with my dad being the Marine that he was.
Mhm.
We spent time with other Marine families. They were babysitting us. My mom was babysitting them, watching to make sure nobody burned the house down in some respects. But I remember specifically being at this family that we love. Their name is the Chavez family. I remember they were Catholic. We were not. There was 4 of them. There was 2 of us, my brother and I, before my cousins came to live with us. They had different rules than we did. Some of the rules crossed over. One of the things is when we sat down to eat dinner, they did their Catholic prayer before dinner. I remember the first time, have a foggy memory, looking at my brother kind of with one eye closed, one eye sort of open, going, this is different. This is weird. This is, what are we doing? I don't even know what to do. I remember as things progressed, it seemed less weird. It seemed more normal. But I remember one of the big rules was Mr. Mike, who's now in heaven, would not let us leave the table unless we asked permission. We had to ask.
Wow. Yeah.
We had to say, Mr. Mike, or Top, because he was a master sergeant by the time his time ended in the Marine Corps. So we called him Top. That was kind of his nickname in the Marine Corps, if you will. May I be excused? I remember that. We had to ask, may I be excused? And I just thought to myself, how many times in life do we actually make that declaration? Hi, yeah, may I be excused because I no longer want to be here? Or do we just get up and go in the quiet of the night, just secretly fade away? What's the right way to do that?
Well, I think within a military family, especially, I mean, there's a clear hierarchy. Like, that's what the military hinges on, hierarchy. And especially when it's a family that's not your culture, they've invited me in. How do I respect this space? And sometimes leaving the table isn't quote unquote specifically leaving the table. You can ask for permission to leave a table. I think as a kid that you're working with social rules. I don't know if it like exactly translates to like adults in social situations. To your point about that, I think you respected your elders in the way that you could in that specific moment. For us now, because there's still that kid inside of us, no matter how old you are. I'm 36. Sometimes I feel like, when will I learn how to be an adult? Like, when will I grow up? I'm growing older, but I'm not really growing up. There's a part of me that as a kid, running away from certain situations, leaving certain situations is what kept me alive, is what kept me safe. There are certain situations I should stay in, I should stay seated in, I should stay present in because that's what decorum required of me. And there were certain situations that the disrespect that I was receiving no longer warranted the reciprocal respect on my end. I do not have to receive what this person is serving. And often it was manipulation, abuse. And I thought, I'm leaving. I'm leaving and I will find home elsewhere. This is not home. This is not hospitality. If you did the same thing to me today, you said you cannot leave this podcast without asking permission to be excused. I'd be like, dude, what are you talking about? That's not what we're doing here. This is a totally different social situation. I would probably be like, all right, I had an experience. I think as a kid, you're learning when those times are, when to stay and when to leave. As an adult, you've been in that situation so many more times that your discernment is better honed. I'm a 36-year-old woman who does not and who has not given this person across from me permission to teach me a lesson. And they are not treating me as a peer. They're not treating me as an equal worth and value. They're treating me as a child. Whenever I'm a 36-year-old woman, I'm going to leave. It's a mutual space. And I see humility. Even if we're so different, I see humility and a willingness to expand and grow and learn and to welcome my weirdness. Then I'll stay. I'll stay and say, like, well, what are we doing? What are we playing? What game are we playing? What are we laughing about? Like, I will stay. It doesn't need to be the same as me. It's just I need some sort of like assurance that we are on equal footing and I am not somehow less than.
Started to think about things that you leave, and I started to think, okay, what do you leave? You leave the basic one. Relationships is one that you leave. Some people will then leave a church. So again, still relationships. People leave jobs. I've left a few of them in my wake.
Yeah.
You can't really leave a family per se. People try through divorce and other means. You can leave a family, and you can even leave this world. And I started to think about, why does someone leave? Why does someone finally say, again, going back to maybe our quote, you must find the courage to leave the table if respect is no longer served. Bring that back to say, I had to leave a church. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I've had to leave relationships. That probably ranks second. I'm never going to leave my marriage. I don't care how bad it gets. We'll figure out a way to fix it. I don't think I'm ever going to leave my kid. I've tried to leave my family. They seem to keep coming back. My outside family, by the way, not my daughter and my wife,
Yeah.
just to be clear. It's hard to leave those type of relationships. It's hard to leave those type of environments that we felt at home. There have been times I felt at home at the church that I left. There have been times I felt at home at a job where I'm like, man, I love everyone here. We feel like a family. We fight, we make up, great times. We have laughing moments. We have crying moments. Maybe it's just me in the corner crying, but we have these type of moments. What about for you? Do you have, or am I just way off base again in the other category of things?
I have the ability to leave now for a long time within my family of origin and within the church that I was a part of. I never wanted to leave. Earnestly, I believe that within my former church, I helped plant it. I helped when it was just 6 people. I helped name it. I helped foster it and see it grow. I thought this is the family within which, the chosen family, the found family within which I will forever find belonging. Hand to God, thought my memorial or my funeral will be in this sanctuary. Like, that's what I thought. And I had the power to leave, the ability to leave. Staying with that particular group of people required me over and over again to leave or abandon myself. And I think that's one thing that we don't talk about often enough, is like how in really harmful relationships, respect isn't reciprocal and abuse is prevalent. That abuse requires you to leave and abandon yourself over and over and over again. I think I had the power to leave because, and not that it was gutting, and not that everyone in that church made me feel that way, but I had the power to leave because the person who had power over the church required me to abandon myself, to leave myself, to forsake the wisdom within me that was saying, hey, something here isn't right. And I think that's true for many of us. I think people finally have enough disrespect, finally have enough of like that sort of toxin and poison where they realize, if I keep ingesting this, I'm radioactive. I will be nuclear waste if I keep ingesting. I will go Super Saiyan if I don't stop digesting this poison. And so we have to leave. And I think particularly, if you want to go Super Saiyan, please do. That might be like a really specific niche cultural quote. People won't get it unless they know cartoons. If you want to Hulk out, if you want to get angry, like that's within your right. But also, I know that that's not the sort of person I want to become always. Leaving helps me return to shalom, which is peace and wholeness and goodness. Churches should be places of shalom, and you have to leave when they aren't. And you have to leave when they cause internal chaos and fractured shalom within you. I find the power to leave a place when a place requires that I leave and abandon myself not just once, but like over and over and over again. Sort of behavior like that fractures the world. It doesn't foster wholeness in the world.
We had a series, in fact, our second season, called You Lost Me. And it centered around this really lame book that I actually was forced to read. And I actually never read it. I actually just listened to it on audio. So is that reading it, or is that?
Yes, that counts.
Okay, that counts. All right. So in that case, if it counts, according to Janai, I actually read the book 7 times. In that, the whole premise of that book talks about why this generation that we are currently experiencing is leaving the church in droves, church with a capital C. Now, it does take an evangelical, get a lot of their data from. It's the Barna Group that put it out, by the way. And I just remember feeling like a failure as a youth leader when I finished reading the book, to the point where I was wrapping up my first season of the show, and a friend of mine actually came to me mid-season and said, I really love what you're doing. I want to help. His name's Garrett, and he ends up becoming our executive producer. I love what you're doing. I love this idea of people leaving the church. I think church hurt is a real thing. Yeah. And, back then I thought, yeah, okay, I know some kids that have left youth group, whatever reason. And so I went out and actually sought out former youth kids that I had in youth group, that I was their leader and they were my students. It was great to see them again as adults and then walk through some of our more funnier and awkward moments, because I was a young leader. I was 19 when I inherited a youth group. I was a kid yet myself leading kids. It always seemed weird to me. Nonetheless, that was the dynamic. Feeling the failure from some of them. If I was a better leader, would you have been in church right now? Because most of them, if not all of them, I think on some level have left the church. And so I took that personal. I think, did I fail them? Did I let them down? Did I not give them the Christ-like example that I strived for every day? If I gave you that moment, that opportunity to sit with maybe an old leader from your youth days, or maybe even your past church experience. We're getting ready to do a Netflix thing. We're talking about how people left our church and we don't know why. And we want to come back and find out why after the fact, and how we can be better and what we should have done. I mean, we see those documentaries all the time where somebody comes out of a really horrific experience. I think they did one on the dance cult thing, which was fascinating. I kind of stumbled on it. My wife was watching it and I was like fascinated by cults, because I am fascinated by cults. But in that, like, I always wondered why people leave and why it takes them so long to leave. If somebody comes back to you from that church experience that you had that was somewhat negative from the sound of it, say, hey, Janai, we want to sit with you. We want to know, why'd you leave? Why do you feel like you had to leave the table? Because Jesus says, come to my table. And we're saying, no thanks.
Yeah. I left the table because it no longer looked like Jesus. It didn't look like his ministry. It didn't look like the food, the sustenance that they provided looked nothing like Jesus's daily bread. It looked nothing like the table. And so I had to leave, because instead of grace, there was manipulation. Instead of Christ-likeness, there was control and coercion. I truly believe in union, in unity within the body of Christ. I don't believe that requires that I sit down, shut up, and do as I'm told, regardless, because of the hierarchy, regardless of, like, the leader can never be challenged. And I think that puts too much power. The ways in which we have structured the institution of the church looks more like a pyramid, like Pharaoh's pyramids with someone at the top and a bunch of people down at the bottom. It looks more like a pyramid, more like a hierarchy than it does the kingdom of Christ. If it looks like a pyramid, then it can never be a table, because we will never be equal. There will be some who are allowed to the table and some who aren't. Jesus, when he reclined at table, if you're familiar with Hebrew social structure, they were like laying down at the table. They weren't sitting in chairs. It's almost akin to like a sleepover where we're just kind of on our elbows talking with one another. There's a kinship there. I had to leave because there was no longer kinship. It was a system, a machine that looked more like empire than God's kingdom. I mean, that's what I would tell them. And that's what I have told them. I told them, you hold to the rules and the regimens of the system, but you forget that there's a people inside that need to be loved. And we forsook the love of God's people for money, for finances, for someone to have power. I left because the person who was in the pulpit 85% of the year spoke truth and grace, And he was the most ungracious, most manipulative person Monday through Saturday. That's why I left. I don't want to put words in other people's mouths. I would say for many of us, that's why a lot of people leave. My dad would have said the word hypocrites. My dad was not a Christian. He was like, they're hypocrites. And I was like, all right, Dad, I roll. Get what he's saying now. There's a cognitive dissonance in asking me if I'm seeing it out. And so I venture to believe that many people leave because of in some sort of internal reckoning that starts with some sort of fracture in the system that they're a part of. Many people have to leave to find wholeness, to find shalom, to find holiness. The church in general, they leave their faith in general. That's not my story. I am friends with some of those people who have fully deconverted. For them, I get it. I left and retained my relationship with God. I had to leave to retain my relationship with God. That's what I have told my leaders. I don't know if that's what they heard.
Listen, when anyone leaves this situation, whether it be, again, a job, a church situation, a community group, or whatever it may be, there's hurt and we tell people about it. There's hurt and we don't keep it down. We don't internalize it. We don't push it down. We generally will go to the first person that we can to listen. I'll give you an example. I am obsessed with college sports. I absolutely love it. People ask me what my favorite sport is. I say college sport. Those that know me, those that have spent any time with me know I'm undoubtedly going to talk about the University of North Carolina. Those people at EA Sports hate me clearly because I was all set and ready to get this brand new game called NCAA 25. I had bought an Xbox during the pandemic. I was ready. The game came out. I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to go put it on the Xbox because I have one of those digital ones now that don't need the CDs or the discs. And I go to get ready to do it. And I Google first because that's the kind of guy I am. And I find out the Xbox I currently had doesn't support the game. And I was really mad, very disappointed. I worked it out. I got some money saved sort of through some health savings stuff that they do at my company. And I end up going out and buying an Xbox Series S so I can get the game, jump on Best Buy. I find it. I find an open box. Best Buy's like, hey, we'll have it ready for you in an hour. Come pick it up. It'll be ready. I'm like, cool. Buy it at work. And I'm like, okay, 30 minutes from now, I'm going to have an Xbox. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be great. Go to Best Buy. It's not ready yet. I'm like, okay, cool. Super excited, but it's fine. So I walk down to Ross because it shares a parking lot. I was trying everything in my power not to buy shoes at Ross. And so I'm looking around. I'm like, man, it's been like an hour and a half. Can't believe I've been here this long. Struggle is real, folks. It's real. So I walk back down to Best Buy. By the way, Apple Watch is now dinged. Hey, it looks like you're on an outdoor workout. Would you like to go ahead and start a timer? I'm like, no, Apple Watch. I'm just trying to buy an Xbox, but thanks. So I get in there, and the very nice lady behind the counter is like, yeah, so I don't know how to tell you this. We don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? It says it's going to be ready in an hour. Yeah, for some reason there's a hold. Really need to wait for the email to come through that says it's ready. But it says it was going to be ready in an hour. Just go get it. No, it's not ready yet. Fine. So I went home. I'm like, all right, very disappointed, but I went home. It's like, this really sucks. And I called Best Buy the next morning, by the way, because I'm still mad. And their customer service is like, yeah, you just got to wait. Wait for that email to come through. Sorry, there's really nothing we can do. Sometimes they have to get it from another store, yada, yada, yada. This is dumb. 2 hours later, after my phone call to customer service, I finally get the email that says it's ready. Get it back to my office, set it up real fast, download the game on my company's internet. Yes, because it's faster. And I'm all excited, pack it back up in the box, ready to go home and play it. My wife texts me at 5:27, right as I'm about ready to leave my office to go home for the day. She said, honey, I don't know how to tell you this, but the power's out at the house. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I threw the biggest 5-year-old temper tantrum I think a grown adult ever should do. And I was so mad. And I was so angry. And by the way, I blame Best Buy. I don't blame the power company, even though I want to. But I blame Best Buy. Had it been ready that hour, I would have been able to play it the first night. I feel like that's life. I will probably tell that Best Buy story the rest of my life. It's funny. It's comical. Nobody really got hurt. That's not true in every case.
Yeah.
People are going to fail us. Organizations are going to fail us. Family's going to hurt us. But what do we do with that pain? What do we do with that hurt? Do we go around again? Woe is me. Look at the scars that I have. This is the moment we got burned. How does Janai not allow the toxicity, the hurt, to continue to be the woe is me story, be more empowering.
Yeah. For those who are woe is me, I want to make space for them. I know that they have lived a life and a story that I know nothing about. I want to make space for that and for people to know whatever is ailing you, it matters. And I think I was there at some point. I write in my book, Othered, that like grief is a part of the process. You've got to be allowed to grieve it. We've got to be allowed to sit in the discomfort of the scars. Think about any friend who has been wounded, hurt, and they just don't have the stamina or the energy, or their bones are so broken they just can't pick themselves up by their bootstraps. Maybe they don't have boots at all, and they're shaming themselves for the things that they don't have because they can't pick themselves up. With that friend, I would not say, well, just try harder. I would say, like, let me sit here with you and be with you. And once you have a second, we can figure out a game plan. And I will be a part of making sure that you get back up. I want to be a part of that. I will invest time and energy. I think for the people who love us, they do that for us when we're in our deepest moments. They say, I want to be a part of helping you stand back up on your feet, or helping you grow and become the person that you're going to become. But I don't think our scars are a liability. I think our scars and our wounds, that's evidence of all the wisdom we have that we never asked for. It's all the wisdom we never wanted. I think it's through that wisdom, acknowledge that it can make more people vengeful, seeking retribution. I will totally admit, I have been vengeful. I have wanted to seek retribution. I was a kid of the 90s. I also know what it feels like to egg someone's car and feel really good about it. I've toilet papered a few people's houses before we had video doorbells and stuff, where you can't really do that anymore. There's still that inner child in me because of the story I live, and because of the scars I carry, because the wounds I've incurred that I never wanted, that's given me this tremendous wisdom, comes alive some days. I am able to be compassionate and empathetic. I think my wounds have made me a more empathetic person. But to get to that point, I had to grieve the fact that people failed me. And I had to believe, and I have many people who have failed me who have apologized. That is a huge part of the healing process. I have many people who have failed me who have never apologized, will never apologize, will never own their actions. The cool and empowering thing is I told myself one day, I will heal anyway. And my retribution, my justice is my joy. I hope they see this joy. And I hope that they know that I learned to thrive without them. My thriving is actually hinged on living a life without them. There are some people who will never apologize to us, but I believe that healing is possible. I believe that there is like an internal mechanism within all of us that helps us grow and learn. Sometimes we learn in spite of the people around us, not because of them, despite what they've done. I think sometimes it's a choice, but I think it's also a movement. This is the way I'm going to move and become the person who thrives anyway. I'm going to try to bloom where you buried me. I think that's powerful.
I think that's profound. Because again, I think so many times people try to just say, okay, it was awful. It was terrible. And they want to focus on that. And my question always to myself when I get to those moments is, okay, you had your moment of this sucks, this is awful. Now what do you do next? Are you going to continue to say it's that person's fault? The old adage, when you're pointing at one person, three fingers are pointing back at you. What's my role? What's my part to play in that?
I will answer in what I did. Like, what's next? What happens when you leave? I was a part of my former church for 11 years, and I tell kind of that story in my book, Othered. Where do you go when you've been thrown out into the desert with no resources, no relationship, and what do you do? And I think the cool thing is I shifted in my perspective of what am I able to do to what do I want to do? What do I get to do? What do I get to build? not what am I subject to. And I will say for people who have experienced, I would say that I experienced some level of spiritual abuse in my former church. Subjugation and kind of domination, coercion, control were the names of the game. There was an abusive relational dynamic there. For people who have and who are healing from an abusive dynamic, you feel subject to everything. I feel like I have to be subject. Like they don't know, like you almost don't know what it is to have an identity where you're capable of generative, life-giving action. And so when you get to that place, when you heal enough to get to that place, or I don't think anyone's perfectly healed. I think I am continually healing. Part of that healing now is remembering, what do I get to do? What do I get to build? What sort of joy do I get to be a part of? That's helped shift my perspective from I was victimized. That doesn't mean I'm perpetually a victim. I had to survive something that was unjust and cruel and unkind, unloving, unchristlike. I was victimized by some people, but I don't wear my victimhood as a mentality. Say, yes, I was victimized. And also, yes, I get to build something cool. And hopefully what I'm building, what I'm writing, helps other people see that they can bloom where they've been buried also. And that's almost the very nature of growth. Something dies so that something new can be reborn, can blossom. And I want people to see that they're capable of that too.
So some would ask, what happened? Why'd you leave? What was the breaking point?
The breaking point was, and this is years of relational strife distilled down to a few sentences. I could no longer take the disrespect from a pastor. As a pastor, you're supposed to shepherd. You're supposed to know the voice of your sheep. You're supposed to care for the sheep. You're supposed to know the voice of your sheep. A particular relational dynamic. I was a sheep who was saying, hey, you're hurting me in how you're leading. I'm a very responsible person. I tend to get stuff done. I don't dilly-dally. When someone sends me an email, I send you one right back. I try not to sit on that when someone's waiting for a response from me. I try to be considerate. When someone who is, I would venture to say narcissistic, finds that, they start to exploit those traits in people. And because I worked for the church, exploiting me made the church money. Details that are superfluous, like multi-million-dollar capital campaign where we were raising money to build a new building. I feel like that's the story of every church. We're raising money to build a new building. That's just kind of the name of the game. He valued how people perceived him. He would put this mask on and look like the buddy for everyone who wasn't a part of this the staff dynamic. But in the staff, he was manipulative. I remember one other staff member said is that, like, I feel handled by our pastor. And I was like, I think that's just a polite way of saying he's manipulating you. You're not supposed to handle people as a pastor or as a shepherd. You're supposed to care for them. You're supposed to love them. Feeling handled. The pastor feels more like a CEO. Is that really a church? Or is it a business? What happened was, there's this internal part of myself that is willing to take it until I can't take it anymore. And I stood up and said something. I effectually became the whistleblower that said, hey, this is not good. We are not practicing what we preach. And when you venture to tell a pastor that, when that's all he preaches on Sundays, and you're calling out the disparity, you become the bad guy. So I became the bad guy. So it was spiritual abuse over a long period of time. And this is a person that was like a friend, whose wife was a friend. Our kids were friends. I was speaking to him as someone I knew. The moment I didn't even try to bruise his ego. I was like, hey man, I came into this dynamic unaware of how hard it could be. And there are things that I need to own. Here are some of the things that I think you need to own. But I hope that we lock hands and move forward together. But instead of seeing invitation into goodness, he made it an us versus them, me versus her. The only way that he could survive was to other me. And he was a pastor. It was just a spiritually abusive dynamic where you had to sit down, shut up, and fall in line, or you got scapegoated. And I was not willing to sit down, shut up, and fall in line anymore because falling in line was no longer Christ-like. A decade plus in a church, that was what happened.
And yet you still, for those that have maybe walked a similar road, who are now maybe applauding your efforts, you've still chosen to stick with your faith. You've still chosen to say, well, just because that person represented Jesus doesn't mean that I have to forsake the real Jesus.
Yeah. I also get to represent Jesus. in that moment, in standing up, there's a scripture where Jesus goes into the temple courts and he starts flipping tables because those tables were exploiting people who were trying to draw near to God. Standing up to my former pastor was, and I hope to never have to do it again. And I don't think it was saying Jesus was like, well, I'm going to come into this city and start flipping some tables. I had to flip a table because people were being exploited. I no longer find community with those people who set the table aright again to keep exploiting people. I could no longer be a part of that because then I would become complicit in it.
It's a good way to put it. So, Janai, I heard through the grapevine of the California Raisins, going back to the 80s/early 90s, that there's a book out that should be consumed and read by others. Tell us more about that, would you please?
In sharing this story, touch on a few things from like childhood, why I became a Christian. I came from a Christian, non-religious family. I wrote this book, Othered. I came to the church to belong, to become a part of something. And I was for almost 2 decades. I was a part of this thing. Watching it all fall apart was gutting. I wrote this book really as an invitation for those who also feel othered. I use the term othered because sometimes abuse is a really hard word to reach for. Trauma is a really hard word to reach for. Feeling other, that song, like one of these things is not like the other. Feeling othered, feeling less than is, I think, a universal experience. And I think God in the Bible, in the scriptures, directly speaks to that. And not only speaks to that, but draws people in and says, you belong, you're welcome, to build a space, to build a seat at the table specifically made for you. Kind of like that Goldilocks story. Some chairs don't fit. Some beds aren't big enough. Some are too small, but I truly believe that God creates a space specifically for every single person. And so I wrote Othered as an invitation to those who have felt scapegoated, who have felt excluded, who have felt dehumanized, marginalized. And I wrote it to them as an invitation to see that they matter. Some of the scriptures that have been used against them to ostracize them, to cast them out, have been misused. And actually the whole entire story of God is him helping people find home. So in this homecoming series, the last chapter of my book is called Finding Home, because I think that's the story of the Bible. God is calling us to a home. We're not there yet. It is there. It's being built. Truly believe that Jesus, using his carpenter's hands, is fashioning a place for you, for me, for us. There is no them. There's only us. There's humanity. My invitation is for those who have felt pain to see that God is still inviting them, that they are not excluded simply because a pastor or a leader or any other Christian has cast them out.
I feel like the other category really encapsulates the last kid picked at kickball.
Yeah, that was me.
It's always such an awful thing being the last kid picked. I mean, I've watched dynamics for years in youth group settings, in sports settings, where you have everybody line up in that horizontal line and you got two people that somehow were better than everyone else and they got to be the captains. And then they got to decide the fate of the rest of the kids on the line. I remember watching this dynamic as a kid, picked maybe first couple of picks, and then I started to see it whittle itself down to Scotty, and nobody wanted Scotty. And I actually remember a kid, truly, his name was Scotty. He had a bladder issue, and so naturally as kids, we were really respectful of that. We were very honoring of that. We were very empathetic to that. We called him Scotty Potty. We ripped that kid apart. We didn't know what bullying was back then. And I remember at one point him crying, and that just egged us on more, it just fueled the fire.
Yeah.
I have no idea his last name. I don't know anything about the kid other than his name was Scotty. And I think to myself, did he get right? Did he get fixed? Because, man, we othered the darn near tar out of him. And I guess that's the damage I wonder about. And maybe that's where you could jump in and speak to this more, is why is empathy absolutely lost art in this world that we're in your opinion? If I gave you the power to maybe change the world, is empathy up there, or where does that rank?
Yeah, I think instead of calling it empathy, I would call it compassion. That's a word in the Bible that is all throughout the Bible. He had compassion on them. Compassion is more than just empathy. Oh man, dang, he's really going through it. It's more like I am feeling this with you. Compassion. So a feeling with. I am moved in such a way that I can't just be like, oh, all right, like he told me his story and I'm going to go about my day. It's feeling moved. And so I think compassion is incredibly necessary. I believe that a lot of folks, stuff happens to us as kids. And then those kids grow up, but that kid inside of us never really goes away, kind of forms a part of our identity. And I think kids, even at their smallest levels, sense these social dynamics that are formed by scarcity believing there's a hierarchy to climb and only a few get to climb it. And that hierarchy depends on people being subjugated at the bottom, feeling othered at the bottom. As an adult, you can take the responsibility to say, I am not going to work from a scarcity mentality. I'm going to believe that there's room for everybody. I'm going to believe that my identity does not hinge on someone feeling less than. And that's what bullying is. That's what othering is. For me to have self-esteem, to like myself, I need to compare myself to another person. In comparing myself to another person, I'm going to pick the weirdest person, the most ostracized person, and subjugate them. That's actually a dynamic called the Lord Bondsman dialectic. It was kind of coined by this guy named Hegel. He's a philosopher, phenomenologist, and he kind of developed this whole idea of like the consciousness of the self. What does it mean to be a self, to have self-esteem? And he said that a lot of people, to have self-esteem, or self-consciousness, they have to subjugate another person. I mean, this was like over 100 years ago, and we still believe that. I think he tapped into something that's pretty core to our identity. And then there's this whole thing called the social identity theory that was coined by a guy named Henri Tajfel. He was a Polish Jew who survived World War II. And he thought, what does it take for a group of people to so hate another group of people that they no longer see them as people? It's the playground bullies growing up and necessarily growing up, but growing older and finding power and using that power to push people down instead of rising together. I think compassion, eradication of power is not necessarily the answer. I think we all have an innate power within all of us to take care of the earth, to cultivate, to build something, to create. Compassion helps us use our power to empower others. In Scotty's case, translating that story to today, we're going to play this game of kickball. Do you want to come? No, I'm not good. I get that that's what the social group is doing. I would rather go to the library. Does anyone want to go to the library with me? I don't have FOMO. I don't have fear of missing out. I almost have JOMO, which is the joy of missing out, the joy of being weird, the joy of not fitting. I don't necessarily want to do everything that everyone's doing. And I think I only have that because I found a sense that my weirdness is a gift. It's not a liability. And it's a gift because I can find all the other people who feel like they're weird and they don't fit, learn to foster a space that makes them feel welcome as well.
I love that. The joy of missing out. It's good. It's good stuff. So where can folks get the book? How can someone connect with you? All the fun things that we love to do towards the end of this thing. And then we're going to do our fun game at the end. We have a game to play still. So how can people find out about you? And
I'm hanging out kind of on social media, although I feel like that's like a boiling cauldron of weird. I'm on social media at Janai Amen. I write a Substack newsletter about once a month. I try not to irritate people with like daily emails or weekly emails because I get it. Substack at Janai Amen as well. But the book is everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you want to support local booksellers, bookshop.org is a great place. You can shop at my publisher's online bookstore, Baker Bookhouse. It's available to read Audible. I read my own audiobook, so people can hear me read my own story, which is pretty cool. Please do, because it took so much work to like read that audiobook. That is a skill that I did not know that took honing. Book is everywhere. And if you want to talk about it, send me an email. If you have a book club and you meet on Zoom, let me know. I will try to make it for meetings. I'm a human being.
She's a human being that handles her own social media. Well, Janai, again, I just want to say thank you. Full disclosure, she was part of the Magnificent Seven. If you don't know what that is yet, you missed some shows. You might want to go back a couple episodes. I lost like 7 shows. Janai was one of the 7 shows. She graciously has come back again. Thank you for that. Thank you for being kind enough to come back again.
I look at our first episode, the one that was lost, as you and I building a conversation and a friendship to make this possible. So this episode possible. So podcast interviews are weird. You don't know who you're getting. And this time around, I knew who I was getting whenever I logged on. So this was fun.
You knew who you were getting. That's a good way to put it. All right, well, let's play our fastest growing game. Zach, take it away.
It's now that time in the show to play the fastest growing game in the podcast world. We call it Heel Hustle. Today our guest will try to answer all 6 of these questions in 60 seconds or less to win an Amazon gift card. Amazon not responsible for this commercial spot, nor did they pay to let us use their name. Audience, feel free to play at home. Are you ready? Let's put 60 seconds on that clock. Ready, set, hustle!
That's right. It's the fastest growing game in the podcast community. It's Heel Hustle. Here we go. Janai, one person you would trade places with for a week.
Michelle Obama.
Nice. Guilty pleasure.
Oh, eating Rice Krispie treats.
Shameful. Best compliment you've ever received.
I'm a good writer.
Nice. Worst piece of advice you've ever received.
Oh my gosh. Worst piece of advice? Just ignore your car's check engine light. It'll work itself out.
That is terrible. What's one thing you wish you were better at?
Basketball.
Never fails to make you smile.
Stand-up comedy.
Oh, just at the wire. Great job. I love Heel Hustle. I think that was the greatest idea Zach has ever come up with.
That's a great idea.
Zach has good ideas every now and then. Janai, thank you. You're great. We have enjoyed having you. I don't know who the we is. I got some feedback from somebody once and they're like, Neil, help me out. Who's the we? It's just you, isn't it? I was like, well, me and Jesus, that's the we.
I contain multitudes.
I have an alternate personality. His name's Zach. I don't know why I choose Zach. Maybe because of Zach Morris. I always wanted to be Zach Morris, so I channel my inner Zach Morris with my Jimmy Neutron hair that apparently people are making fun of me for now. Truly appreciate you giving us another chance. Just love that you had some moments for us today, so thank you for that.
No, it was great. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, you last kids picked you. How many when I made that statement of the last kids picked, like you started perspiring? Like you put yourself back into those shoes you were wearing in elementary school on the line. It's real. Is that you right now? Have you been at home being the last picked? My wife, I love her dearly. 23 years now together. We should love each other dearly. She often says she's the Sue Heck. If you know the show The Middle, you know what I'm talking about. She's like, I'm not memorable. Nobody would know if I was in class or not in class. I wasn't one of those kids. You on the other hand, people would know when you were not there. I remember one time being sick, and I know this because we wrote letters back and forth in high school together. And she actually talks about in one of the letters that people noticed I wasn't there. So I'm wondering about that for you. Is that you right now? Are you still wondering and hoping that you can get picked? That you're tired of being in the other category? Okay, so what are you going to do about it? What's your first step forward to say other no longer? I'm now going to be something else. I have some ideas. Let me know. I'll let you know if you want. You can let me know at opspodcast.com. You can also let us know on the socials at OPS Podcast Show under Facebook, Instagram, and X. And with all that said, do not forget this. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.